My name is Amanda Johnson. I'm 22 years old, and 3 months ago, my entire world collapsed in front of 500 people at my college graduation. What should have been the proudest moment of my life became the day my parents looked me in the eye and told me I was no longer their daughter. But here's the thing about rock bottom, it's the perfect foundation to build something extraordinary. Let me take you back to that devastating day, because understanding where I came from is crucial to understanding how I got to where I am now. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this whole story. The morning of graduation started like a fairy tale. I woke up in my tiny studio apartment near campus, sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd sewn myself from clearance fabric. My cap and gown hung pristinely on the closet door, my summa cum laude honor cord draped carefully across the desk where I'd spent countless nights studying. I was the first person in my family to graduate college, and I was doing it with the highest honors. I should have been over the moon. Instead, I felt like I was walking toward my execution. You see, my parents didn't know about Marcus. They didn't know that the man I'd fallen head over heels in love with, the man who made me laugh until my sides hurt and supported my dreams when I doubted myself, happened to be Black. In their narrow worldview, this was unforgivable. I'd hidden our relationship for 2 years, creating elaborate lies and alibis because I knew exactly how they'd react. But graduation day was different. Marcus had bought a plane ticket from Chicago, where he was completing his medical residency, just to watch me walk across that stage. After years of secrecy, after years of feeling like I was living a double life, I'd made the decision to finally introduce him to my parents. I was 22, educated, about to start my career. Surely they'd see that their daughter had chosen a good man who loved her. God, I was naive. My phone buzzed at 8 a.m. A text from Marcus. Landed safely. Can't wait to see you walk today, beautiful. I'm proud of you no matter what happens. That last part made my stomach clench. He knew this was a risk. We both did. My parents arrived at my apartment at 10, dressed in their Sunday best. Mom wore the pearl necklace she saved for special occasions, and Dad had on his only suit, the one he'd worn to his brother's funeral 5 years earlier. They looked proud but nervous, clearly out of their element in the university setting. "Amanda, honey, you look beautiful," Mom said, adjusting my cap for the 3rd time. "I still can't believe our little girl is graduating college." Dad cleared his throat. "We brought the camera with the good lens. Want to get pictures of everything." My heart broke a little, knowing what I was about to put them through. But I'd made my choice. I couldn't keep living in the shadows, couldn't keep the person I loved hidden away like some shameful secret. "Mom, Dad, there's someone I want you to meet before the ceremony, someone very important to me." They exchanged glances. Mom's expression grew curious, Dad's grew suspicious. "Important how?" Dad asked. Before I could answer, there was a knock at my door. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked over and opened it to reveal Marcus, in his navy suit, holding a small bouquet of white roses, my favorite. "Congratulations, Dr. Johnson," he said with that warm smile that had captured my heart in organic chemistry class 3 years ago. Then he looked past me to my parents, extending his hand professionally. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I'm Marcus Williams. It's wonderful to finally meet you." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face went through several color changes. Pale, then red, then a disturbing shade of purple. Mom's mouth fell open and she took an actual step backward as if Marcus, being in the same room, posed some physical threat. "Amanda, honey," Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. "What is this?" "This is Marcus," I said, moving to stand beside the man I loved. "We've been together for 2 years. He's a medical resident at Northwestern and he—" "Get out," Dad said. "Dad, please, just listen." I said, "Get out." His voice exploded through the small apartment. "Get out of my daughter's apartment. Get out of our lives. Get out." Marcus, bless him, remained calm.
"Sir, I understand this is a surprise, but I love your daughter very much, and I just wanted to—" "Don't you dare talk about love." Mom finally found her voice, and it was shaking with rage. "Don't you dare stand there and talk about my daughter like you have any right—" "He has every right," I interrupted, finding my own voice. "Marcus is the kindest, smartest, most decent man I've ever known. He's going to be a doctor, he treats me like a queen, and I love him." Dad turned his fury on me then. "Amanda Rose Johnson, if you think we raised you to throw your life away on some— Don't you dare," I warned, my own anger flaring. But he was past the point of rational thought. The mask had slipped completely, revealing the ugly prejudice that had always lurked beneath my parents' polite exterior. "Some N-word who's obviously just using you for—" The word hung in the air like a bomb had gone off. Marcus went very still beside me, his jaw clenched. I felt something fundamental break inside my chest. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" Dad blinked, confused by my quiet tone. "I said get out. Both of you, get out of my apartment." "Amanda, don't be ridiculous," Mom tried to recover. "Your father is just upset. You can't blame us for being shocked that you've been lying to us for 2 years. I lied to you for 2 years because I knew exactly how you'd react. Because I knew that instead of trusting that you raised me to have good judgment, instead of giving the man I love a chance, you judge him based on nothing but the color of his skin." "We raised you better than this," Dad said. "No." I shook my head, tears starting to fall. "No, you didn't. You raised me to hide who I really am, to be ashamed of love, to judge people by their race instead of their character. That's not better, Dad. That's worse. If you choose him, you're no daughter of mine." The ultimatum hung between us. Marcus started to say something, probably to tell me it wasn't worth it, but I held up my hand to stop him. This was my choice to make. "Then, I guess you don't have a daughter," I said quietly. And that's when my mother started to cry.
They left without another word, slamming the door so hard that my neighbor's dog started barking. I stood in the sudden silence of my apartment, Marcus's arms around me, and wondered how everything had gone so wrong, so fast. "We don't have to go to the ceremony," Marcus said softly. "We can just stay here, order pizza, celebrate privately." I pulled back to look at him, this incredible man who'd just been subjected to the worst kind of hatred, who'd been insulted and degraded by the people who were supposed to love me most, was worried about my feelings. "No," I said, wiping my eyes and straightening my cap. "I earned this degree. I'm walking across that stage, and I'm doing it with you in the audience cheering me on." He smiled and kissed my forehead. "That's my girl." If only I'd known that the worst was yet to come. The graduation ceremony was being held in the university's main stadium. As we walked across campus hand in hand, I felt like I was walking to my own execution. Part of me hoped my parents had just driven home in their hurt and anger. But I knew them too well. They'd never missed their daughter's graduation, no matter how angry they were. Sure enough, when we reached the stadium, I spotted them in their reserved seats in the family section. They weren't talking to each other, weren't even looking at each other. Dad sat with his arms crossed, staring straight ahead. Mom dabbed at her eyes with tissues. The ceremony began with all the usual pomp and pageantry. When they called my name, Amanda Rose Johnson, summa cum laude, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, I walked across that stage with my head held high. I shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma, and smiled for the official photographer. And from somewhere in the general admission section, I heard Marcus whooping and cheering loud enough for both my parents. But as I walked back to my seat, something was wrong. I could feel it. There was a commotion in the family section, people turning to look, murmurs spreading through the crowd. That's when I saw him. Dad was on his feet, his face red with rage,
pointing at Marcus in the stands and shouting something I couldn't quite hear over the applause for the next graduate. Dad was standing in the middle of the family section, his voice carrying across the stadium as he pointed accusingly at Marcus. "That man is harassing my daughter. He's been stalking her, threatening her." I felt the blood drain from my face. The lies were so outrageous, so calculated, that for a moment I couldn't even process what was happening. Security guards were surrounding Marcus, who kept his hands visible and spoke in calm, measured tones. "Dad, stop," I screamed, pushing past confused family members. "Stop lying." But he was beyond reason now, lost in his own rage and prejudice. "She's been brainwashed. He's manipulated her, isolated her from her family." The graduation ceremony had essentially ground to a halt as everyone turned to watch our family drama unfold in real time. I finally reached Marcus, who was speaking calmly but firmly to the head of security, an older black man who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. "Ma'am, we're going to need to sort this out," the security chief said to me. "Your father is making some serious allegations." "My father is lying," I said loud enough for everyone around us to hear. "Marcus Williams is my boyfriend of 2 years. He's a medical resident at Northwestern. My father doesn't approve of our relationship because Marcus is black, and he's trying to have him arrested rather than deal with his own racism." The words echoed through the stunned silence that had fallen over our section of the stadium. I saw people exchanging glances, saw the security chief's expression change as he pieced together what was really happening. Dad's face went from red to purple. "Amanda Rose Johnson, don't you dare—" "Don't I dare what? Tell the truth?" I was shaking now, with anger, with humiliation, with the sudden clarity that this moment was changing everything forever. "If you choose him over your family, you are dead to us. Dead. Do you understand me? We have no daughter." The stadium might as well have been silent. I heard every word with crystal clarity, saw the faces of strangers staring at me with a mixture of shock and pity. Mom finally looked up from her hands. Her mascara had run in black streaks down her cheeks, and she looked older than I'd ever seen her. For a moment, I thought she might contradict him, might choose her daughter over her husband's hatred. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Dead to us," she whispered. But in the silence, everyone heard it. Marcus stepped forward then, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, ma'am, I understand you're upset, but Amanda is an adult who can make her own choices. I love your daughter, and I've never done anything but treat her with respect and support her dreams." "Don't you speak to us," he snarled. "Security, I want this man arrested for trespassing, for harassment, for—" "Sir," the security chief interrupted, his voice professional but clearly annoyed. "From what I can tell, this young man has done nothing wrong. He has a valid ticket to this public event, and your daughter has confirmed their relationship. I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seats or leave the premises." Dad looked like he might explode. He glanced around at all the staring faces, at the phone still recording, at his daughter standing defiantly beside the man he'd just tried to have arrested. "Fine," he said finally. "Come on, Margaret, we're leaving." But as they turned to go, he couldn't resist one final devastating blow. "Don't ever contact us again, Amanda. You've made your choice, and we've made ours. You're not our daughter anymore." They walked away through the crowd of shocked onlookers, leaving me there in my graduation gown, diploma still clutched in my hand, with everyone staring at me like I was some kind of tragic spectacle.
The next few weeks were a blur of pain and practical necessities. I had to find a new apartment I could afford on my own. No more help from parents who'd been supplementing my rent. I had to buy interview clothes without my mother's promised graduation gift. I had to figure out how to be an adult completely on my own without the safety net I'd always taken for granted. Marcus flew back to Chicago for his residency, and suddenly I was alone in a way I'd never been before. Don't get me wrong, he called every day, texted constantly, sent care packages when he could tell I was struggling, but
He was working 80-hour weeks at the hospital, and I was dealing with the practical and emotional aftermath of being disowned by my family. The hardest part wasn't the money, though that was tight. It wasn't even the loneliness, though there were nights I cried myself to sleep missing my mom's voice. The hardest part was the constant question that plagued me. Had I made the right choice? When you're 22 and you've just lost everything familiar, when you're job hunting in a competitive market with no family connections to help you, when you're eating ramen for dinner for the fourth night in a row because it's all you can afford, doubt creeps in like poison. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe I had thrown my life away for a man. Maybe I should have just kept the relationship secret, found some nice white boy my parents would approve of, lived the safe, predictable life they'd planned for me. But then Marcus would call exhausted after a 36-hour shift, and the first thing he'd ask was how my day went. He'd listen to me ramble about job interviews and rejections and the loneliness that felt like a physical ache, and he'd somehow make me laugh despite everything. And I'd remember that this was what real love looked like. Not the conditional love my parents had offered, love that evaporated the moment I made a choice they disagreed with, but the kind of love that showed up even when things got hard. The job market was brutal. I must have sent out 200 resumes in those first 2 months after graduation. Most never got responses. The ones that did led to interviews where I had to explain gaps in my resume, why I didn't have references from family friends, why I was so eager to relocate anywhere in the country. By August, I was down to my last $100 and seriously considering moving back to my tiny hometown and taking any job I could find just to survive. That's when I got the call that changed everything. Amanda Johnson? This is Sarah Chen from Thompson Marketing Group in Denver. We received your application for our junior account executive position, and I have to say, your portfolio impressed us. Would you be available for a phone interview this week? My heart hammered as I tried to keep my voice professional. Absolutely. When would work best for you? The interview went better than I dared to hope. Sarah was smart, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in my ideas about digital marketing strategies for small businesses. The position comes with full benefits, a starting salary of $45,000, and significant room for advancement if you prove yourself. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in? I almost laughed. Interested? It sounded like a lifeline. By the following Friday, I was sitting in a sleek conference room in downtown Denver, meeting with the entire marketing team. The energy in the office was electric. People were passionate about their work, collaborative but competitive, and completely focused on results rather than politics or personal connections. "We're not interested in where you came from or who you know," David Thompson explained during my final interview with the company president, David Thompson himself. "We care about what you can do and how fast you can learn. Your portfolio shows real creativity and strategic thinking. Your academic record proves you can handle pressure and exceed expectations. That's what we're looking for." For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the daughter who disappointed her parents, not the girl who'd chosen love over family, just Amanda, smart, capable, ready to prove herself. "We'd like to offer you the position. Can you start in 2 weeks?" Denver became my salvation. The city was beautiful, full of young professionals who'd come from somewhere else to reinvent themselves. I wasn't the only person starting over, and nobody asked uncomfortable questions about family or background. Thompson Marketing Group was exactly what I needed, a fast-paced environment where results mattered more than pedigree. I threw myself into work with the desperation of someone who had nothing else to lose and everything to prove. My first client was a struggling yoga studio whose owner, Alina, had amazing classes, but no idea how to market herself online. I spent weeks learning everything about her business, her students, her vision for creating a wellness community. "Most marketing people just want to throw money at Facebook ads," Elena told me after our third strategy meeting. "You actually care about what I'm trying to build here." That became my signature approach. I didn't just market businesses. I understood them. I spent evenings and weekends learning about industries I'd never heard of, studying customer behavior, testing new platforms and strategies. Within 6 months, I'd increased Alina's client base by 300% and helped her open a second location. Word spread quickly in Denver's tight-knit business community. Sarah pulled me aside one day in December. "David's been watching your work. You're exceeding every benchmark we set for junior executives. How would you feel about taking on some of our bigger clients?" By my first anniversary at Thomson, I was managing accounts worth over $2 million and had been promoted twice. I'd found an apartment in a trendy neighborhood, bought my first car, and started building the life I dreamed of in college. But success came with its own challenges. The bigger clients meant longer hours, more pressure, higher stakes. I was working 60-hour weeks, traveling constantly, living on coffee and adrenaline. Marcus and I were struggling to maintain our relationship across time zones and demanding schedules. He was in his final year of residency. I was climbing the corporate ladder, and we were seeing each other maybe once a month. "I miss you," he said during one of our rushed phone calls. "I feel like we're living parallel lives that never actually intersect anymore." He was right, and it scared me. After everything I sacrificed for this relationship, were we gonna lose each other to our careers? "What if you moved to Denver?" I asked one night. "You could do your fellowship here, and we could actually build a life together." The silence on the other end of the line stretched too long. "Amanda, you know I support your career completely, but I've already been accepted to Northwestern's cardiology fellowship. It's exactly what I've been working toward for years. I can't just throw that away." "I'm not asking you to throw it away. I'm asking you to consider that there might be other opportunities, other paths that would let us be together." "Like you considered staying on the East Coast so we could be closer?" It was a fair point, and it stung because I hadn't considered it. Not really. When the Denver job came along, I jumped at it without discussing alternatives with Marcus, without thinking about what it would mean for our relationship. We were both so focused on proving ourselves professionally that we'd stopped prioritizing us.
The wake-up call came in March, almost 2 years after graduation. I was in Los Angeles for a client presentation, working 18-hour days to secure a contract that would make my career, when Marcus called with news that changed everything. "I'm getting married," he said without preamble. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" "Her name is Keisha. She's a nurse at the hospital. Amanda, we've been drifting apart for months. You know we have." I sat down hard on my hotel bed, the phone trembling in my hand. "Marcus, we can fix this. We just need to make more time, prioritize each other more." "When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about work?" he asked gently. "When was the last time you visited Chicago or I visited Denver? We're not building a relationship, Amanda. We're maintaining one out of habit and guilt." The worst part was that he was right. We'd become strangers who shared a history, two people too busy building separate lives to notice that we'd stopped building a life together. "I gave up my family for you," I whispered. "No," Marcus said firmly. "You gave up your family for yourself, for the right to make your own choices, to love who you wanted to love, to be who you really are. That was never about me, Amanda. That was about you." He was right about that too, but it didn't make losing him hurt any less. We ended the call with awkward promises to stay friends, but we both knew we wouldn't. How do you stay friends with someone who represents the road not taken, the choice that cost you everything?
I sat in that hotel room in Los Angeles, surrounded by the trappings of the success I'd worked so hard to build, and realized I'd never felt more alone in my life. I'd lost my family for love, and now I'd lost love for career success. What did that make me? What was the point of any of it? That night, for the first time since graduation day, I seriously considered calling my parents. It had been almost 2 years. Maybe they'd softened. Maybe they'd realized that cutting their only daughter out of their lives was a mistake. I sat there with my phone in my hand for over an hour, staring at my mother's contact information. All I had to do was press call, apologize for choosing Marcus over family, promise to find someone more appropriate, and maybe I could have parents again. But then I thought about what that would mean. It would mean admitting that their love had conditions I was willing to meet. It would mean agreeing that Marcus, kind, brilliant, loving Marcus, was somehow less worthy because of his race. It would mean betraying everything I'd built, everything I'd learned about myself and what I was capable of. I deleted their contact information from my phone that night, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some choices, once made, have to be lived with. The months after Marcus and I broke up were the hardest of my life, but they were also the most important. For the first time since high school, I was completely on my own. No boyfriend, no family, no safety net except what I could build for myself. And that's when I discovered what I was really made of. I channeled my heartbreak into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I took on projects that other account executives wouldn't touch. Difficult clients, impossible timelines, budgets that required miracles. I worked weekends, holidays, whatever it took to prove that I was indispensable. But more importantly, I started thinking bigger than just executing other people's visions. I began developing my own ideas about marketing, my own theories about brand building and customer engagement. "You should start your own agency," Elena suggested one day over coffee. Her yoga business had grown into a franchise with 12 locations across 3 states, and she credited our original marketing strategy with much of her success. "I don't have the capital," I replied automatically, "or the connections, or the client base." "You have something better," she said. "You have a track record of results and a reputation for integrity. People trust you, Amanda. That's worth more than capital." She was right. But starting my own business felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. What if I failed? What if I lost everything I'd worked so hard to build? Then I remembered sitting in that hotel room in Los Angeles, feeling like I'd achieved everything I thought I wanted, but still feeling empty. What was the point of playing it safe if safe didn't actually make me happy? I gave my notice at Thompson Marketing Group on a Friday in September, exactly 3 years after starting there. Sarah tried to talk me out of it, offering a promotion and a substantial raise, but my mind was made up. "You're making a mistake," David Thompson warned me. "The failure rate for new agencies is astronomical. You'll be back here in 6 months begging for your job." Maybe he was right, but maybe he was wrong. And I'd rather fail attempting something extraordinary than succeed at something that felt ordinary. I used my savings to rent a small office space and bought used furniture from businesses that were closing down. I designed my own logo, built my own website, and spent weeks crafting a business plan that would have made my business school professors proud. Johnson Strategic Marketing officially opened for business on November 1st, 2027, with exactly 1 client, Elena and her yoga franchise. By the end of that first month, I had 3 clients. By Christmas, I had 7. Word of mouth is powerful in the small business community, and my former clients at Thompson followed me to my new venture. But the real breakthrough came in February when I landed a contract with Rocky Mountain Brewing Company, a craft brewery that was struggling to compete with bigger brands. Their founder, Jake Morrison, was a former tech executive who'd left Silicon Valley to pursue his passion for brewing. Every marketing firm we've worked with treats us like we're trying to be Budweiser, but we're not. We're trying to be something completely different, something authentic and local and real. I spent a week at the brewery, learning about their process, their values, their vision for what beer could be. Instead of trying to compete with the big brands on their terms, we created a campaign that celebrated everything that made Rocky Mountain Brewing unique. Crafted, not manufactured. Real beer for real people. Taste the difference authenticity makes. The campaign was a massive success. Rocky Mountain Brewing's sales increased by 400% in 6 months, and they expanded distribution to 5 new states. More importantly, the campaign won 3 national advertising awards and got featured in Marketing Week magazine. That article changed everything for Johnson's strategic marketing. Suddenly, I was getting calls from businesses across the country who wanted the Rocky Mountain treatment for their brands. I had to hire employees, rent a bigger office, turn away clients because we were booked solid. By my 2nd anniversary in business, Johnson's strategic marketing had grown to 15 employees and annual revenue of over $3 million. I'd been invited to speak at marketing conferences, featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 list, and asked to teach a graduate course at the University of Denver. Success brought its own challenges, but they were good challenges. I was building something meaningful, creating jobs, helping other entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. I had a team of brilliant, creative people who challenged me every day, and a roster of clients who trusted me with their most important marketing decisions. More importantly, I'd built a life that was entirely mine. I lived in a beautiful loft downtown, traveled whenever I wanted, supported causes I cared about. I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, but I was open to possibilities in a way I hadn't been for years. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, almost 5 years to the day after my parents had disowned me. "Amanda, this is your Aunt Carol." I nearly dropped the phone. Carol was my mother's sister, and I hadn't spoken to her since before graduation. As far as I knew, my parents had convinced the entire family to cut me off. "Carol?" I managed to say. "How did you get this number?" "I've been following your career," she said, and I could hear emotion in her voice. "The magazine articles, the awards, the business you've built. Amanda, I'm so proud of you." I had to sit down. After years of silence from anyone in my family, hearing those words hit me harder than I'd expected. "Your mother doesn't know I'm calling," Carol continued. "But I couldn't stay silent anymore. What happened at your graduation, what they did to you, it was wrong. I should have said something then, should have stayed in contact, but I was a coward." "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't really. "No, it's not okay. You were 22 years old, you just achieved something incredible, and instead of celebrating with you, they destroyed one of the most important days of your life." She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. "Your mother misses you terribly," she said finally. "She has every article about you saved in a scrapbook. She's proud of you, Amanda, even if she's too stubborn and too ashamed to admit it." "And Dad?" The silence stretched long enough that I knew the answer before she spoke. Your father is still angry. He sees your success as proof that you chose correctly, and that makes him even angrier because it means he was wrong." I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. Some people would rather be consistently wrong than admit they made a mistake. Would you be open to seeing your mother?" Carol asked hesitantly. "Without your father, just her. She's been wanting to reach out for years, but she's scared you'll reject her the way they rejected you." I thought about it for a long time. The woman who had raised me, who had taught me to be strong and independent, even as she had failed to model those qualities herself, who had stood silently while her husband disowned their only child. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've built a good life, Carol. I'm happy. I'm not sure I want to risk that emotional chaos again." "I understand," she said. But think about it. You only get one mother, Amanda, and she only gets one daughter. After we hung up, I sat in my office overlooking downtown Denver, watching the sunset behind the mountains. I thought about the scared, heartbroken 22-year-old who'd arrived in this city with nothing but a suitcase and a job offer. I thought about everything I'd built, everything I'd learned, everything I'd become. That girl needed her parents' approval to feel worthy. This woman didn't. That girl had been devastated by the loss of conditional love. This woman understood the difference between love and manipulation. That girl was afraid of being alone. This woman had learned that being alone and being lonely were two very different things. Maybe I was strong enough now to face my mother without losing myself in the process. Maybe I was secure enough in who I'd become to risk opening that door again. Or maybe some doors should stay closed. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Carol's number. "It's Amanda," I said when she answered. "Tell my mother she can call me, but she needs to understand that I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I'm not looking for her approval or her forgiveness for my choices. If she wants a relationship with the woman I've become, not the daughter she thinks she lost, then we can talk."
My mother called 3 days later. I was in the middle of a client meeting when my assistant knocked on the conference room door. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but you have a call from someone who says she's your mother. She sounds emotional." I excused myself from the meeting and took the call in my office, closing the door behind me. "Hello, Amanda?" Her voice was older, more fragile than I remembered. "Thank you for being willing to talk to me." "Hi, Mom." We sat in awkward silence for a moment. 5 years of separation, of hurt and anger, and missed birthdays and holidays stretched between us like a chasm. "I saw the article in Forbes, 30 under 30. I bought 10 copies." Despite everything, I smiled a little at that. It was such a mom thing to do. "I've followed everything," she continued, the words tumbling out now like she'd been holding them back for years. "Your business, your success, the speeches you've given. I have a whole scrapbook, Amanda. I know it's probably too little too late, but I've been so proud of you." "Then why didn't you call sooner?" I asked, not unkindly, but directly. "Why did it take Carol reaching out for you to contact me?" She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. "Because I was ashamed. Because I knew what we did was wrong, and I didn't know how to admit that. Because I chose my marriage over my daughter, and I've regretted it every single day for 5 years." "And now?" "Now I'm a 60-year-old woman who's missed 5 years of her only child's life because she was too proud and too scared to admit she made a mistake. Now I realize that my husband's approval isn't worth losing my daughter." I leaned back in my chair, processing her words. Part of me had imagined this conversation countless times over the years. In some versions, I was angry and unforgiving. In others, I welcomed her back with open arms. The reality was more complicated than either extreme. "Mom, I need you to understand something," I said carefully. "I'm not angry anymore. I was for a long time, but I'm not now. What happened at graduation, what Dad said, what you both chose, it hurt me deeply, but it also freed me to become who I was meant to be." "I know," she whispered. "I can see that. The woman you've become, you're stronger than I ever was, braver than I ever was. I'm proud of you, but I'm also sorry that it took losing us for you to find that strength." "Maybe it didn't," I said softly.
Maybe you raised me to be strong, and it just took the right circumstances for that strength to show itself." She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. "Can you ever forgive me?" It was the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Could I forgive her? Did I want to? I already have, I realized as I said it. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Mom. And it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be built on who we are now, not who we used to be. "I understand," she said quickly. I just want the chance to know the woman you've become, to be part of your life again if you'll let me." We talked for another hour. She told me about the therapy she'd started after the 3rd anniversary of our estrangement, when she finally admitted to herself that losing me wasn't worth maintaining the peace with Dad. She told me about the fights they'd had about me, the way she'd slowly started standing up to him in small ways. "He doesn't know I'm calling you," she admitted. He hasn't changed, Amanda. He's still angry, still convinced that we did the right thing. I don't think he'll ever come around." "I know," I said. And I did. Some people are too invested in being right to ever admit they were wrong. Would you be willing to see me?" she asked tentatively. "I could come to Denver, or if you ever visit back east." I thought about it. The scared 22-year-old in me wanted to say yes immediately, desperate for any connection to family. But the woman I'd become was more cautious, more protective of the peace I'd built. "Let's start with phone calls," I said finally. "Let's get to know each other again first, and then we can talk about visiting." She agreed immediately, pathetically grateful for even that small opening. We started talking every Sunday afternoon. At first, the conversations were stilted and awkward, both of us trying too hard to bridge the gap of years with careful politeness. But gradually, we began to relax into something that felt almost natural. She told me about her job at the local library, about the book club she'd joined, about finally learning to drive despite Dad's insistence that she didn't need to. I told her about my business, about my employees who felt like family, and about the life I'd built in Denver. "You sound happy," she said one Sunday, about 2 months into our renewed relationship. "Really happy, not just successful." I am, I realized. For the first time in my life, I am exactly where I want to be, doing exactly what I want to do. Even without, she hesitated. "Marcus, getting married? I'm sorry, sweetheart." It was the first time she'd acknowledged him as anything other than a mistake I'd made. The first time she'd expressed sympathy for my heartbreak instead of satisfaction that the relationship had ended. "I was sad about it at the time," I said honestly, "but losing Marcus taught me something important. I learned that I'm complete on my own. If love comes into my life again, it will be because it adds to my happiness, not because I need it to be happy." That's very wise," she said quietly. "I never learned that lesson. I stayed with your father even when he made me miserable because I was afraid of being alone." "It's not too late to learn it now," I suggested gently. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. At 62, with no money of my own, no skills except shelving books, I think I missed my window for independence. "Mom, I built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. You think you can't figure out how to build a life for yourself?" The silence that followed was thoughtful rather than resistant. 6 months into our renewed relationship, Mom called me on a Wednesday instead of our usual Sunday. Her voice was different, stronger somehow, but
also shaky with nerves. "Amanda, I did something today, and I wanted to tell you before you heard it from someone else." My stomach dropped. Had she told Dad about our conversations? Had he given her an ultimatum? I filed for divorce. I nearly dropped the phone. Of all of the things I had expected her to say, that wasn't even on the list. "You what?" "I filed for divorce from your father. I've been thinking about what you said, about it not being too late to build my own life, and I realized you were right. I'm 62, not 92. I could have 20 more years ahead of me. Do I want to spend them being miserable?" I was stunned. This was the woman who'd never learned to drive because Dad said she didn't need to, who'd never had her own bank account, who'd stayed silent while he disowned their only child. "Mom, that's huge. Are you okay? Are you safe?" "I'm staying with Carol for now. Your father was, well, he wasn't happy. But I'm done being afraid of his anger. I'm done sacrificing my happiness to avoid his disapproval." Pride swelled in my chest. This was the mother I'd always hoped she could be. Brave, independent, willing to choose difficult truths over comfortable lies. "I'm proud of you," I said, and meant it completely. "I learned from the best," she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Over the following months, I watched my mother transform. She got her own apartment, a small one-bedroom place near the library where she worked. She started therapy, joined a hiking club, learned to use a smartphone so she could text me pictures of her adventures. "I feel like I'm discovering who I am for the first time in 40 years, she told me during one of our calls. "It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time." That's exactly how I felt when I moved to Denver. Scary as hell, but also the most alive I had ever felt. We were finally becoming the mother and daughter we'd never been able to be when she was trapped in an unhappy marriage, and I was trying to be the perfect child. 8 months after her divorce was finalized, she called with another surprise. "How would you feel about me coming to visit Denver? I've never been west of Ohio, and I'd love to see what you've built there." This time, I didn't hesitate. "I'd love that. When were you thinking?" "Well, there's something else I need to tell you. I've been offered a job." "A job? Where?" "The Denver Public Library. They're looking for someone to head up their new community outreach program, working with local businesses and nonprofits. When I saw the posting, I thought maybe it was time for a fresh start somewhere new." My heart started racing. "Mom, are you saying you want to move to Denver?" "Only if you'd be comfortable with that. I don't want to crowd you or intrude on the life you've built there, but I thought maybe we could build something new together. Not the old relationship we had, but something healthier, something based on who we really are now." I looked out my office window at the mountains I'd come to love, at the city that had given me everything I'd ever dreamed of. The idea of having my mother here, of being able to grab lunch together or celebrate holidays together, was more appealing than I'd expected. "I think that sounds wonderful," I said. Mom moved to Denver in the spring, exactly 6 years after my graduation day disaster. Watching her navigate a new city with the same determination I'd had at 22 was inspiring and healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. She threw herself into her new job with an enthusiasm I'd never seen from her before. Within 3 months, she'd created partnerships with a dozen local organizations and had started a program that brought library services directly to underserved communities. "I never knew work could feel like this," she told me over dinner one night. "Like, I'm actually making a difference instead of just passing time until retirement." "That's how I feel about my business," I said. "When you're doing something that matters to you, it doesn't feel like work." We were sitting in my favorite restaurant, the one I'd discovered during my first lonely months in Denver. Back then, I'd eaten here alone, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake leaving everything familiar behind. Now I was sharing it with my mother,
both of us having chosen difficult paths that led to authentic happiness. I owe you an apology, Mom said suddenly, setting down her wine glass. Not just for graduation day, though I do apologize for that, but for all the years before that, when I taught you to hide who you were, to make yourself smaller to avoid conflict. I raised you to be afraid of standing up for yourself. You also raised me to be resilient, to work hard, to care about other people, I pointed out. I got some good things from you too. But the courage to be yourself, to choose love over fear, to build something extraordinary from nothing, that you did on your own. Maybe, I said, but I also think children often become what their parents need them to be. Maybe you needed me to be brave so you could learn how to be brave too. She smiled at that, the kind of smile that transforms a face completely. When did you become so wise? When I stopped trying to make other people happy and started trying to make myself proud. That night, as I drove home to my loft, I thought about how much had changed since that devastating day at graduation. I'd lost a family, but gained a sense of self. I'd lost a love, but learned to love myself. I'd lost the safety net of other people's approval, but built something much stronger, my own confidence in my choices and my abilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I love you, and I'm proud of the woman you've become. I smiled as I typed back. Thank you for having the courage to change. I love you too.
2 years later, I was in Chicago for a marketing conference when fate decided to test just how much I'd grown. I was grabbing coffee before my afternoon presentation when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Amanda Johnson? I turned around and found myself face to face with Marcus for the first time in 4 years. He looked older, more settled, wearing a wedding ring and a smile that seemed genuinely happy to see me. Marcus, I said, surprised by how normal it felt to say his name. How are you? I'm good, really good. He gestured to a table near the window. Do you have a minute? I'd love to catch up. We sat down with our respective coffees, and I studied the man who had once been the center of my universe. He looked content in a way that made me happy for him rather than jealous. I heard about your business. My wife follows your company on social media. She's in marketing too. She's always showing me articles about you. We're both really proud of what you've accomplished. Thank you. And congratulations on your marriage. How long has it been now? 3 years. We have a daughter, Zoe. She's 18 months old and completely owns my heart. The old me might have felt a pang of loss at hearing about his new family. The woman I'd become just felt happy that he'd found what he was looking for. That's wonderful. I'm genuinely happy for you, Marcus. Are you? He studied my face carefully. You seem different, more at peace somehow. I am. It took me a while to realize that losing you wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of one chapter. A beautiful chapter, but not the whole book. He nodded slowly. I worried about you after we ended things. I worried that I'd been the one good thing you'd held on to after losing your family, and that losing me too would break you completely. It almost did, I admitted. But being broken open is sometimes necessary for growth. I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't gone through that pain. And who are you today? I thought about the question seriously. I'm someone who's learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Someone who builds things instead of just dreaming about them. Someone who doesn't need other people's approval to know her own worth. That sounds like the Amanda I always knew you could be, he said softly. I just wish it hadn't taken so much pain for you to find her. Pain is a teacher. Not a very gentle one, but often the most effective. We talked for another 20 minutes, catching up on careers and mutual friends, sharing stories that felt comfortable rather than loaded with old hurt. When it was time for me to leave for my presentation, he walked me to the elevator. I'm glad we ran into each other.
I've always wondered if you were okay, if you'd found happiness after everything you went through. I have, and I realized it was completely true. I have too. Different happiness than what we had, but real happiness. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. Just before they closed, he called out, "Amanda, for what it's worth, I never regretted loving you. And I never regretted that you chose love over fear, even though it cost us both so much." As the elevator carried me up to the conference floor, I reflected on how healing that conversation had been. The man who had once represented everything I'd lost had become instead a reminder of everything I'd gained: the courage to be myself, the strength to build a life on my own terms, the wisdom to know that some endings are actually beginnings in disguise.
My presentation at the conference went better than I'd expected. I was speaking about authentic brand building, using Rocky Mountain Brewing as a case study, and the audience was engaged and asking thoughtful questions. During the Q&A, a young woman in the back row raised her hand. "Miss Johnson, your story about building your business is inspiring, but I have to ask, how did you find the courage to take such a big risk? How did you know you wouldn't fail?" I smiled at the question because it reminded me so much of my younger self, looking for guarantees in a world that offers none. "I didn't know I wouldn't fail," I said honestly. In fact, I was pretty sure I might fail spectacularly. But I realized that the biggest risk wasn't starting my own business. It was staying in a safe job that didn't challenge me or fulfill me. I was more afraid of a life unlived than I was of failure. After the presentation, several people approached me with business cards and follow-up questions. One of them was the young woman who'd asked about courage. "I'm Sarah," she said, shaking my hand enthusiastically. "I'm 23, just graduated with my MBA, and I've been dreaming of starting my own consulting firm. But my parents think I should take a safe corporate job first, get some experience, play it conservative." I looked at this earnest young woman and saw myself 6 years ago, talented, ambitious, but seeking permission from others to pursue her dreams. What does your heart tell you to do? Start the business. I have ideas, I have passion, I have a solid plan, but what if my parents are right? What if I'm not ready? Sarah, can I tell you something? You're never going to feel completely ready. If you wait until you feel ready, until you have enough experience, until the conditions are perfect, you'll be waiting forever. Sometimes you have to jump and build your wings on the way down. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of failure, fear of disappointing people, fear of making the wrong choice. Let me ask you this. What's the worst thing that could happen if you start your business and it fails? "I'd have to get a regular job," she said immediately. "And would there still be regular jobs available to someone with your education and skills?" "Well, yes, but..." So the worst case scenario is that you end up exactly where you'd be if you played it safe. Except you'll have learned invaluable lessons about business, about yourself, and about what you're capable of when you're fully committed to something you believe in. Her face lit up as the logic hit her. You're right. The downside risk is actually pretty minimal. The upside potential, however, is unlimited. You could build something extraordinary. You could change your entire industry. You could create jobs and opportunities for other people. But you'll never know unless you try. She left with my business card and a promise to send me her business plan. Talking to her reminded me why I loved speaking at these conferences, not just to share my expertise, but to encourage other people to take the kinds of risks that lead to extraordinary lives. Flying back to Denver that evening, I thought about how much my definition of success had evolved over the years. At 22, success meant making my parents proud. At 25, it meant proving that I could survive without them. At 30, it meant building something that would outlast me. Now, approaching my 30th birthday, success felt simpler and more complex at the same time. It meant waking up excited about my day. It meant working with people I respected and cared about.
It meant using my skills and resources to make a positive difference in the world. It meant being proud of the choices I'd made, even the difficult ones. Most importantly, it meant being at peace with who I was, not who I thought I should be, not who other people wanted me to be, but who I actually was at my core.
Last month, on a crisp October morning, exactly 8 years after my graduation day, I received an invitation that stopped me in my tracks. My alma mater was asking me to be the keynote speaker at their upcoming commencement ceremony. "We want someone who embodies the transformative power of education," the invitation read. "Someone who has used their degree as a launching pad for extraordinary achievement." I stared at the invitation for a long time, remembering the last time I'd been on that campus, the last time I'd sat in that stadium. The scared, heartbroken girl who'd walked across that stage 8 years ago felt like a different person entirely. I called Mom to tell her about the invitation. "Oh, Amanda," she said, and I could hear the pride and emotion in her voice. "That's incredible. Are you going to accept?" "I think so. It feels like, I don't know, like coming full circle somehow." "It is coming full circle," she agreed. "You're going back to the place where your old life ended, as the successful, confident woman you've become. You're going to stand on that same stage where you lost your family and talk to hundreds of young people about the power of choosing authenticity over approval." She was right. It was the perfect bookend to this chapter of my life. I accepted the invitation, and today, as I stand behind the podium looking out at 500 eager faces, I think about what I want to tell them. What wisdom do I have to offer these young people who are about to embark on their own journeys? "Graduates," I begin, my voice carrying clearly across the stadium. 8 years ago, I sat exactly where you're sitting now. I was 22, terrified about the future, desperate to make my parents proud, and convinced that success meant following the safe, predictable path that others had laid out for me. That day, in this very stadium, my parents publicly disowned me because I chose love over their prejudice. It was the most humiliating, heartbreaking moment of my life. I thought it was the end of my world. I was wrong. It was the beginning of my real life. You see, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that happens to you in disguise. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is exactly what you need to discover what you actually want. I scanned the crowd, seeing my own younger self in so many of these faces. Hopeful, scared, eager, uncertain. I'm not going to tell you to follow your dreams because that's terrible advice. Dreams are vague and passive. Instead, I'm going to tell you to build your dreams, take action, make plans, take risks, fail spectacularly, and then get up and try again. I'm not going to tell you that it will be easy because it won't be. Building a meaningful life is hard work. It requires courage, persistence, and the willingness to disappoint people who want you to play it safe. But I will tell you this, the pain of discipline weighs ounces, while the pain of regret weighs tons. The temporary discomfort of choosing the difficult path is nothing compared to the permanent ache of wondering what if. Some of you will face rejection from family members who don't understand your choices. Some of you will lose friendships that were built on who you used to be rather than who you're becoming. Some of you will fail at things that matter deeply to you. All of that is normal. All of that is part of the process. The question isn't whether you'll face setbacks. You will. The question is whether you'll let those setbacks define you or refine you. 8 years ago, I left this stadium with no family, no job, and no clear plan for the future. Today, I'm the CEO of a company I built from nothing. I have 15 employees who feel like family, and I wake up every morning excited about the work I get to do. More importantly, I'm proud of the person I've become and at peace with the choices I've made. Your parents, your professors, your friends, they all want what's best for you. But here's the thing, only you know what's best for you. Only you know what makes you come alive. Only you know what legacy you want to leave behind. So as you leave here today and step into the unknown, I challenge you to be brave enough to disappoint some people in service of becoming the person you're meant to be. Be brave enough to choose authenticity over approval.
Be brave enough to build something extraordinary, even if it scares you. Because here's what I learned on the hardest day of my life. You are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and capable of more than you can imagine. The only person who can truly hold you back is you. Congratulations, class of 2035. Go out there and build something amazing. The applause is thunderous, but more than that, I can see it in their faces. That spark of recognition, that moment when someone realizes they have permission to choose their own path. After the ceremony, I'm surrounded by graduates and their families, shaking hands and answering questions. One young woman approaches with tears in her eyes. "Miss Johnson, thank you for your speech. My parents want me to go to law school, but I want to start a nonprofit working with homeless youth. After hearing you speak, I think I finally have the courage to disappoint them in service of my real calling." I smile and squeeze her hand. That's the best kind of disappointment you can give someone, the kind that comes from being true to yourself. As I leave the campus that evening, walking past the same buildings where I'd studied and dreamed about my future, I feel a profound sense of completion. The scared girl who'd left here 8 years ago had become the confident woman who returned to share her story. But more than that, I realized that my parents' rejection, as painful as it was, had been the catalyst for everything good in my life. If they'd accepted Marcus, if they'd celebrated my choices, if they'd continued to provide their conditional support, would I have ever developed the strength to build something entirely my own? I'll never know, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that their worst moment became my greatest opportunity. What matters is that I transformed their rejection into my foundation. What matters is that the girl who once needed everyone's approval became a woman who only needs her own. And that, I think, is the most beautiful kind of success there is.
So that's my story. How losing everything I thought I wanted led me to everything I actually needed. How public humiliation became private strength. How the worst day of my life set me on the path to the best life I could have imagined. I want to ask you something. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What dreams are you putting on hold because you're afraid of disappointing someone? What version of yourself are you not becoming because it feels too risky, too uncertain, too far from what others expect? Here's what I learned. The only approval you really need is your own. The only person you need to make proud is the person you see in the mirror. The only life you're truly responsible for building is your own. If you're facing a choice between what's safe and what's authentic, between what's expected and what excites you, between playing small to keep others comfortable and living large to honor your own potential, choose authenticity. Choose excitement. Choose to live large. Because at the end of your life, you won't regret the chances you took. You'll regret the ones you didn't. If my story resonates with you, if it reminds you that you're stronger than your circumstances and braver than your fears, leave me a comment below. Tell me about a time when you chose courage over comfort, or about a dream you're still afraid to pursue. And if you want more stories about turning setbacks into comebacks, about building extraordinary lives from ordinary beginnings, make sure to subscribe. Because we're all just figuring it out as we go, and sometimes it helps to know you're not alone on the journey. Remember, you are the author of your own story. Make it a good one. With love and respect for your journey, Amanda.